Sorry that you ever left here. Sam, for old time's sake.
Yeah. Sure, for old time's sake. Bye, Martha.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Do you know which transformational sectors will create the next, not billionaires, but trillionaires? Those that dominate sustainability, perpetual clean energy, longevity, quantum computing, space, and autonomy. Astro Perkins' quarterly event showcases these must-see startups, deep tech experts, and the investors backing them. If you haven't already, sign up now before you miss your chance to participate in the trillion-dollar economy. So with that, today I've been joined by Tabitha Upshaw, who is the head of corporate impact at NI. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Scott. It's great to be here.
Well, you have an incredible background. You were former CMO of Global Wildlife Conservation. You headed up Dell's CSR marketing function, and of course at SunPower as well. So I'm curious as to how and why did you find yourself in this vibrant ESG and corporate impact function?
I would say it found me way back at Dell. It was super interesting. I had a long history at Dell, really in marketing, and was looking to make a job change and applied to a job that literally the title was green messaging. I'd had experience in product messaging. I recycled, so that made me infinitely qualified to do this job. And really the rest is history. I got the job and just started to dig in and learn about the world of sustainability that I didn't know anything about. Luckily, I was learning just alongside with many others. And so from there, it just stuck, and really have built my career on sustainability, both from a brand and marketing perspective, as well as programmatic.
You know, it's fascinating because your career, I think that arc is very much in line with also the maturity of where things are with sustainability. I know for the last, several years, it's been about UN SDGs and of course, sustainability, impact investing, and even some of the work that IFC World Bank is doing as well. But it's taken a long time, and it's interesting because you start out with green messaging, and here we are in 2021, and things have really come a long way, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It is, it's breathtaking, really. When I particularly, not only just in the public knowledge of sustainability, what consumers out there are demanding of companies these days, as well as investors. And that piece particularly excites me. So when I started in this work 10 years ago, you had socially responsible investors. And so it was a very niche investment community. And now I've done investor calls the last 3 weeks since we launched our impact strategy, our corporate impact strategy, and just seeing how smart these investors are about ESG, how engaged they are in the conversations. There's statistical modeling that shows, specific attributes that a company has that correlate to financial results. It's really mind-blowing to see how far we've come in 10 years.
Well, that's exciting. And we're going to dig into that. But first, let's introduce your company. What is NI?
So NI, so we're formerly National Instruments. We are a test and measurement company. And so you might be thinking, okay, what's that? We're a business-to-business company, so we are a business that sells to businesses. And so you probably haven't heard of us unless you're an engineer. And so what we do is, if you want your product to work, the products that you experience every day and engage with, so for all your computer electronics, airplanes, cars, if you want those things to work like they should and to be safe, reliable, and durable, you're going to need, or you're going to hope that those products have been tested, and along with that is measurement.
Yeah, and just for the audience that are not as familiar with NI, the organization has been around for more than 40 years. And to your point, they have developed automated tests, automated measurement systems that's really helping engineers to solve some of these toughest challenges. Now, some of those areas, and again, I'm just going to kind of briefly kind of mention it. If you could just elaborate a little bit more in terms of what that means: benchtop measurement and test, distributed measurement and control, high performance test, system engineering software, again, across many industries: aerospace, semiconductor, automotive, electronics, and energy. Can you elaborate a little bit more?
I'll talk to EVs specifically because I think that is particularly relevant to sustainability, in that when you think about the quality of your phone, and how we expect our phones to be reliable for us, but yet sometimes in the summer your phone will kind of power down because it's too hot, right? You don't want your car to do that. And so we have a whole you want your car to be automotive grade. And so it's really our equipment and all of those things behind it that really enable a higher quality of product.
Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense. Again, I think when we get on an airplane, we certainly hope that we make it to the other end of the destination.
Yeah.
So things just have to work, and it's like mission critical aspect where you guys come in terms of the precision and precision, really, whether it's in terms of measurement, time, certain integrity tests and so forth, that falls into QC. Let's transition to talk more about why is corporate sustainability important for NI?
So this is something, it has been in our ethos for the last 40 years. And so, I came to this company and almost a year ago, and I did kind of a listening tour, and we were doing so many things that we weren't talking about. And so we had environmental programs that we were doing, reducing packaging, buying renewable energy, because it was just the right thing to do. And so I just found that it was just so wonderful to hear that, right? And we weren't promoting that in any way, like we just weren't talking about it. And so it's just very much a part of the culture. And so, but we know that people do care about this, that the public wants to hear about it, investors want to hear about it. Our customers also want to hear about it because they want to know that we have shared values with them. And so really, what we've done this past year is create a platform that we can go talk about all of our sustainability. And so really sustainability is about just doing the right thing for people and the planet, but also knowing that that also creates business value for the company as well.
So let's start with the goals, or the certain definable pieces that NI has indicated in terms of what you guys are looking to accomplish in the next several years.
So we have 15 goals across 3 different pillars. The first one is our Changing the Faces of Engineering pillar. If I had to boil that down to one word, it'd be diversity. The middle pillar is building an equitable and thriving society. And if I had to boil that down to one word, it'd be equity. And then the third one is engineering a healthy planet. And so that's really about the environmental sustainability piece. And so for each of those pillars, we have 5 different goals. And they're across, they're company wide, right? And so this is about, what we're doing to make a positive impact at our company and with our employees. Also, what we're doing to make a positive impact by way of our supply chain, what we're doing to reduce the environmental footprint of our company, of our products, but then also how we're using our products to make a difference in the world. And so these are things like our products accelerating time to market for things like electric vehicles, or accelerating time to market for renewable energy. And so, and we really look at that last part as a way that we can really multiply and amplify our impact in the world.
I mean, I think it makes perfect sense given the fact that you guys are really the tools that the engineers are using to build these different types of new generation and oftentimes electrification of some of these devices and use cases. Let's explore a little bit specifically around each of the pillars. So let's start with diversity. What does that mean? And I think different people have different definition of diversity. It's not just racial diversity, but also people are coming from different thought or different background or different philosophies. So can you explain that a little bit?
You may also like our quarterly Ask Your Perkins event that brings some of the most notable experts and category leading startups in their area of sustainability and human survival on Earth and in space. To register, visit askyourperkins.com/events.
Absolutely. And so that's how we define diversity as well. It's really this diversity of thought that is the core idea and the diverse backgrounds. And so it's really it's difficult to build solutions for your customers if you're not considering all perspectives, right? And understanding where they might be coming from. And so and then if you look, there's study after study that will show diverse teams equal higher innovation revenue, or the list goes on. And so it's really it's how do we bring more diversity into our own company, but also how we impact the STEM pipeline as well, particularly the engineering pipeline. I think one of the challenges that we've seen, and it's quite frustrating, is the engineering pipeline hasn't changed much in 20 years. But we've talked about changing the pipeline for a long time. And so that's why we've set a couple of moonshot goals on that, and we'll talk about later. But and so it's really kind of looking at that. And then also thinking about inclusivity as well, right? So you have to partner diversity with inclusivity, or that sense of belonging, because you can try to recruit and attract people to either your company or into the world of engineering. But if they don't feel like they belong there, then they'll leave. And so that's when we see, even like at the sophomore dropout rate of engineers can tend to be higher with women or people of color. And so we just want to make sure that we're pairing the diversity and inclusion aspects of that.
Yeah, I think that is such an important piece of it, because we've had interview, for example, African American engineers that are very senior, and some of the things that we've heard is even in what should be diverse and inclusive large corporate environments, they find themselves in a difficult situation where they're constantly having to prove themselves, or in some cases, if there is another person or persons of similar background, that there's a bit of competition. Like there can only be a handful of them. So it's really highly problematic. And certainly, I think the other piece of it is there's research that shows that when you forcefully structure or almost like regulate, the number of certain types of background people, and force that environment isn't necessarily the same as a culture that is more embracing, which I think falls more within the inclusiveness. Talk to us a little bit about women and inclusion at the board level, but also all the way through the hierarchy. Because again, there's studies that shows that, because when you ask the directors or VPs, EVPs, and so forth, they look below them and they say, well, there's just not enough a subset of women to choose from, when in fact those studies indicate that it started much earlier, even in the entry level, in terms of some of the women being passed over, for example.
It does, and it starts in the pipeline as well, right? So just women and people of color just coming up in the pipeline, but from our company perspective, it's absolutely looking at that. So just making sure that you are looking, are women being promoted? Are people of color being promoted at the same rate that that other people are? And so I think just really taking a look at that, and then root causing and really understanding what those implicit or unconscious biases might be. What kind of supportive culture are we creating to either support women at an individual contributor level or at a leadership level? So part of it is looking at your data, right? So you have to look at it first. And then once you know where your problem spots are, to really dig in and figure out what the barriers are, and then what the biases are, which I think that's really at the root of a lot of it.
And it's challenging, and I think it's one of those things where part of what we're doing is essentially storytelling, and that storytelling over time starts to change culture. And very much like we were talking about your earlier kind of career arc in terms of how things have changed, and a lot of that is really the discussions, the conversations that eventually makes it to mainstream and everyday people. Because a lot of the barriers that you're talking about are fairly institutionalized. The bias is institutionalized. We even see it in machine learning data, for example. So there's just a ton of things. But again, over time, with the right storytelling, cultural embrace of some of these important concepts in practice, then we start to actually make some movement. Let's talk about equity. What does that mean, and how are you guys looking to implement that?
So equity is it's leveling the playing field, right? And so it's really about making sure people have the same opportunity to succeed, right? So everybody's going to the results are going to be different no matter what, but you want to start off and give everybody an equal opportunity. And again, a lot of this will go back to bias, unfortunately, right? And so but when we think about particularly pay equity, a lot of it goes back to fundamentally looking at your data, and then looking at those barriers and looking at the biases to create a more equitable situation and fairness, right? Like, are we judging people equally, and are we judging people fairly?
Yeah, I mean,
We're evaluating. I think.
Yeah, there's so much to explore here. I remember, I think we had someone that we interviewed where their father or grandfather was I think pre kind of the civil rights aspect in the 60s before that. But that person, who was of African American descent, was working in some sort of an automotive factory context, and you had to be of certain color to be able to fall into the apprenticeship and actually be part of the foreman and people that's actually doing the real engineering work. And this man, who was African American, just didn't have the opportunities and couldn't really equitably increase his his income, because he just didn't have that ability to send to apprenticeship and then eventually to the more engineering type of roles. So the question that's going to come up is, and again, it's highly contentious around affirmative action as an example, where what does it mean to be fair? And in order to be fair, do we have to be unfair?
That's a great question. And it does come up a lot. And I think it's, a lot of this is just, it feels like zero sum, right? So for some people to get ahead, that means other people are going to have to be left behind. And, to some degree, that feels like there's some truth there. But the way we're trying to approach it at NI is, again, giving, giving folks the opportunity to succeed, I think is the biggest, is one of the most important things. And then also really opening our aperture about what great looks like and what success looks like. I'll kind of start with, like, from a recruiting standpoint, we talk a lot about the best and the brightest. But what does that mean, and where do the best and brightest come from, right? So we've fundamentally changed the way we're thinking about recruiting. And so things like removing the need for a 4-year high school degree, because that is going to change that the net that you're casting is going to be very different, right? And we're looking at, can we create opportunities for 2-year engineering degrees, and create more accessibility, right? And so that's how we're trying to approach things, is, best and the brightest looks it can look it can look bigger than what we're, how we define it today. And so I think that's a large part of it.
Yeah, I think, when we think about that, it reminds me of IBM during the 50s and 60s, where there was a certain kind of a Minuteman, right, in terms of what criteria of ideal fit in terms of working at IBM. And now today, of course, it's the Goldman Sachs and other kind of high-flying types of companies. But they tend to recruit fairly exclusively from the Ivy Leagues. But in fact, again, I think I'm kind of using this in a slightly different context, but there's research that shows that sometimes students that go to maybe tier 2, tier 3, even tier 5 types of schools and end up getting their PhD, for example, may actually end up being more prolific and more productive as researchers and applied scientists as well. That sometimes when we actually go to more the elite schools, we feel pressured and feel that we don't quite meet that standard, for example. So I think the point that I'm trying to make to you in agreement with you is that there is great intellect and great pool of capable people that don't necessarily fit within what we call the prestige, that are just as qualified. When Stanford professors open up their AI courses worldwide, some of their best, algorithms are not from students at Ivy Leagues, but some really remote place around the world that, have come up on top. So I think the key is to give them a chance. Now, to that end, how is the HR function structuring, mentoring, and particularly not just mentoring kind of the next level up, but I think to move into more of an executive role, you really need a champion at the kind of the EVP, SVP level. How are those people kind of reaching down to some of the earlier career professionals and making sure that there's a pathway for them?
Don't forget to visit astroperkins.com to register for our next quarterly events. Past and current speakers include Julianne Hough, actress, dancer, and winner of Dancing with the Stars; Damian Vaughn, former NFL player; Neil Gregory, Chief Thought Leadership Officer at the IFC World Bank; and many more. To register, visit astroperkins.com and click on Events.
So there's so many exciting things that are happening. So a few things. One is, and I would say it's a partnership between HR and the managers too. And so I will say our managers have come to HR with some really great ideas. So for example, the management team said, hey, let's redefine some of our more entry-level jobs. So that way we can really cast a wider net of people that come in, and really, so if you can come in with a 2-year degree, we can actually train you at NI to the level of someone who might have a 4-year degree. And so it's ideas like that. So just really changing our leveling. So that's one piece. And the other piece is that you asked was about the executives. And so there's two pieces of that. One, we have an executive DEI council. So where we kind of govern and meet once a quarter to talk about the progress that we're making. And so it is things like, we talk about things like mentorship, we talk about things like recruiting, building relationships with HBCUs, local technical colleges, and things like that. And so I would say it's happening everywhere, and it's both tops down and bottoms up, from an HR corporate perspective, and then what managers are just kind of taking on their own and leading. So it's been really exciting to see.
I'm glad to hear that. And again, I think it's all about making the incremental progress. So it's about the direction. The last piece, of course, of that pillar is on the environment side. And when we think about sectors such as transportation, aerospace, semiconductor, I mean, there's a lot of transformative things happening. Transportation, we're seeing almost entire new platforms. I mean, to move from combustion engines to electrification and eventually hybrids and hydrogen fuel cells, that is a significant change to not just materials, manufacturing and supply chain, but the testing and the verification of those things. Aerospace, what we see is really the launch and the satellites, but that space is just beginning to explode in such a way that we're going to, start to see things like mining, asteroid mining, lunar mining, to even financial services and insurance and reinsurance types of products coming out. So that's a really interesting area. And of course, there's a ton of engineering innovation that's happening there. And then semiconductor, we're not just talking about TPUs and GPUs anymore, but this edge analytics and things that are really supporting nodes and intensive computation. Take a extreme case of that is the autonomous vehicles, for example, including aviation side. So there is a massive transformation happening there. So in that midst, how is NI helping to support sustainability and positive externality versus negative externality to the environment?
Yeah, so I think it's great point. So we're doing the things that we should do in terms of reducing our own environmental footprint, our operations, and then as well as our product footprint. And then on the flip side, it's really with largely around accelerating time to market for a lot of these technologies, right? So when you think about you don't want tests to be the bottleneck in your product development life cycle, right? So you've got to test at all different phases of the development cycle. And so you can't not test, right? You don't want to do that, particularly when you think about an autonomous vehicle, right? Like it absolutely needs to be tested because test equals trust. But if you can accelerate the test and automate and accelerate and use those analytics and all the data that you're getting from the test to really condense the overall product life cycle, then you're going to get these products to market faster. When you get products to market faster, as then you can iterate, right, and make them better and better and better. So I think that's one of the ways that test, and particularly our equipment, can help really accelerate these technologies that are either lowering emissions or making things safer for us, or even carbon capture.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And to your point, certainly part of that acceleration is also reducing rework errors and costs, because let's say you ran a major wafer run and it wasn't quite to the right precision level, and it's essentially waste that gets thrown away as refuse. So it's the ability to accelerate in a way that makes sense, and certainly helping to reiterate in a way that is, again, conservative and environmentally friendly. So with that, I've been joined by Tabitha Upshaw, who is the head of corporate impact at NI. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you, Scott.
And for those of you listening, don't forget to sign up for Astor Perkins' upcoming quarterly event. We feature some of the most prominent global thought leaders, industry leaders, and deep tech startups tackling some of the greatest threats facing human survival and sustainability on Earth and in space. That's astorperkins.com.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.